Who is thinking your thoughts? Discover the Buddhist truth behind the mind. A story of the mind's hidden stream. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a peaceful river, watching the water flow gently by. You notice how the current moves constantly, never the same from one moment to the next. It seems as though the water is always changing, yet the river never stops, it simply flows. One day, a curious traveler walks by and asks, "Where is the river going? Why does it never stop?" You watch the water for a moment and realize that the river doesn't have a fixed destination, it just flows, endlessly, with no particular direction other than the natural course of the land. The same is true of the mind, the thoughts that arise within it, and the questions we often ask ourselves about who we are. Like the river, our thoughts come and go, sometimes swiftly, sometimes slowly, but always flowing, always moving. We may try to grab onto a thought, hold onto it, or even change its course, but the stream of thinking remains beyond our control, unpredictable and impermanent. This is where Buddhist teachings come in. The Buddha's insight into the nature of thoughts and the mind teaches us to recognize that, just like the river, our thoughts are always changing and flowing, and there is no permanent thinker behind them. Through the practice of mindfulness and awareness, we can learn not to be swept away by this constant current of thoughts, but instead, observe them from a place of clarity and peace. In this video, we will explore how thoughts arise, why they flow without control, and how understanding the nature of the mind can lead to true freedom and peace. 1. The mystery of thoughts and thinking, a Buddhist perspective. The nature of thoughts. Have you ever noticed that thoughts seem to appear in your mind out of nowhere? One moment, you're fully engaged in an activity, and the next, you're replaying an old conversation, planning for the future, or worrying about something beyond your control. It often feels like these thoughts are intruding on our consciousness without invitation. If we are not deliberately thinking these thoughts, then who is? This question has puzzled philosophers, neuroscientists, and spiritual seekers alike. In Buddhism, the answer is profound: there is no permanent self behind our thoughts. Instead, they arise due to conditions and disappear just as naturally. Today, we'll explore this concept through the Buddhist teachings of dependent origination, Pratītyasamutpāda, non-self, Anatta, and mindfulness, Sati. But more importantly, we'll discuss how understanding this can help us gain inner peace and wisdom in daily life. The automatic nature of thought. One of the most striking aspects of human thought is that it happens automatically. You don't consciously decide to have every thought that enters your mind, it just appears. Try this experiment. Close your eyes for 10 seconds and try to predict your next thought. Did you succeed? Most likely, the very act of trying changed what came to mind, or perhaps you struggled to summon a thought at all. This experiment reveals a crucial insight: you are not in full control of your thoughts, and they arise from causes beyond your conscious effort. According to Buddhism, this aligns with the doctrine of dependent origination, Pratītyasamutpāda. This principle explains that everything arises due to conditions, and nothing exists independently, including thoughts. Your thoughts emerge from a vast network of previous experiences, emotions, sensations, and subconscious triggers. The Buddha's realization under the Bodhi tree. The historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, reached enlightenment after deeply observing his own mind. Sitting under the Bodhi tree, he noticed how thoughts came and went without a fixed self controlling them. His insight: thoughts are impermanent and have no central thinker. They arise, persist for a moment, and fade away just like ripples in a pond after a stone is thrown. This realization is central to the Buddhist teaching of Anatta, non-self. There is no fixed, permanent I directing your thoughts like a captain steering a ship. Instead, the sense of I is itself a mental formation, another thought arising in the stream of consciousness. Stories to illustrate the nature of thought. To make these ideas more relatable, let's explore a few stories that illustrate how understanding thoughts can transform the way we experience life. 1. The story of the uninvited guest. Imagine you're hosting a dinner party, and an uninvited guest suddenly walks in. At first, you're confused. Who invited them? You might feel frustrated or uncomfortable. But if you step back and simply acknowledge their presence, without reacting, you take away their power to disturb you. Thoughts are like uninvited guests. They appear unexpectedly, sometimes bringing worry, fear, or anger. If we identify with them believing they define us, we suffer. But if we simply observe them without clinging or resistance, they lose their grip on us. This is the essence of mindfulness, Sati, the ability to witness thoughts as passing clouds in the sky, rather than getting caught in their storm. 2. The two arrows, how we suffer twice. The Buddha once taught the parable of the two arrows. Imagine you are struck by an arrow. This represents the inevitable pain of life, loss, disappointment, illness. However, what causes most suffering is the second arrow, the mental anguish we create by overthinking, worrying, and resisting what is. For example, if you lose your job, that's painful, the first arrow. But if you constantly replay the event, blame yourself, and dwell on fear, that's the second arrow. Buddhism teaches that by observing our thoughts without attachment, we avoid the second arrow. We acknowledge pain but don't fuel it with excessive thinking. Practical ways to work with thoughts. Understanding that thoughts arise automatically is one thing, but how do we apply this wisdom in everyday life? Here are some practical Buddhist techniques to cultivate awareness and freedom from compulsive thinking. 1. Mindfulness meditation, Vipassana. Vipassana, or insight meditation, is the practice of observing thoughts without judgment. Sit quietly and focus on your breath. When a thought arises, simply note it, thinking, remembering, planning. Then return to the breath, without engaging in the thought. Over time, this practice weakens the grip of automatic thoughts and creates space between you and the thinking process. 2. Is this useful? Technique. Before indulging in a train of thought, ask yourself, is this useful? If the thought helps you solve a problem, learn something, or act wisely, engage with it. If it only causes stress, regret, or anxiety, let it go. This technique trains the mind to prioritize beneficial thoughts and discard unnecessary ones. 3. Labeling thoughts. Instead of getting lost in thoughts, label them. This is a memory. This is a worry about the future. This is a judgment. Labeling creates distance and prevents thoughts from pulling you into their stories. 4. The river analogy. Imagine standing by a river. Thoughts are like leaves floating downstream, If you jump into the river and chase each leaf, you'll be carried away. But if you stand on the riverbank and simply observe, you remain steady and free. The goal of Buddhist practice is not to stop thoughts, but to change our relationship with them, watching them without attachment. Conclusion: what can we take away? We started with the question, if we are not our thoughts, then who is thinking them? Buddhism teaches that thoughts arise due to causes and conditions, not from a fixed self. They are like passing clouds in the sky, impermanent and ever-changing. Key takeaways. 1. You are not your thoughts. They appear automatically, shaped by past experiences and subconscious conditioning. 2. Observing thoughts without attachment leads to peace. When you see thoughts as temporary, you no longer react emotionally to them. 3. Mindfulness is the key to freedom. By watching thoughts as an impartial observer, you weaken their power over you. 4. Not all thoughts are helpful. Learn to distinguish between useful thinking and unnecessary mental noise. 5. Let go of the illusion of a permanent self. The I that thinks is itself a thought, one of many arising in the vast stream of consciousness. Final reflection. In the Angulimala Sutta, a monk once asked the Buddha deep metaphysical questions about the self. Instead of answering, the Buddha remained silent, implying that these questions dissolve once one directly experiences the truth. Likewise, the question, who is thinking my thoughts, becomes irrelevant when we shift from identifying with thoughts to simply witnessing them. So, the real challenge is not to find the thinker, but to recognize the still awareness behind the thoughts. That awareness, calm, spacious, and free, is our true nature. 2. The illusion of a fixed self behind our thoughts, a Buddhist perspective. Are you the one controlling your thoughts? Many of us believe that we are the ones controlling our thoughts. We assume that there is a self behind the thinking process, making decisions, and directing the mind. But if that's true, why do thoughts arise spontaneously, without our conscious effort? Try this: decide what your next thought will be. Can you predict it with certainty? Probably not. Thoughts appear and disappear like waves on the ocean without a fixed origin, without a true controller. Buddhism teaches that this illusion of a fixed self is one of the greatest misunderstandings we have about our minds. The truth is, there is no singular I thinking these thoughts, just a continuous, ever-changing process. In this video, we'll explore why our sense of a fixed self is an illusion, how Buddhist psychology explains the mind's functions through the 5 aggregates, Pancakandha, stories from Buddhist tradition that illustrate how great practitioners came to understand this truth, practical ways to shift our relationship with thoughts and find more peace in daily life. The flowing river, how thoughts function without a controller. Most people assume that their thoughts are like a film being played by a central thinker. But Buddhism offers a radically different perspective. Thoughts are more like a river, constantly flowing, always changing. Imagine standing by a river. You see leaves, twigs, and petals floating downstream. Some objects move swiftly, others swirl in small whirlpools before continuing their journey. Thoughts behave the same way. One idea triggers another, which leads to another, forming an endless chain of mental activity. But here's the key insight: there is no permanent thing that owns the river, just as there is no fixed self that owns your thoughts. They arise due to conditions and fade away naturally. This aligns perfectly with one of Buddhism's fundamental teachings, Anatta, non-self. The five aggregates, what we call self, is just a process. To understand why the idea of a fixed self is an illusion, let's look at one of the most important Buddhist frameworks, the five aggregates, Pancakandha. According to the Buddha, what we call self is just a collection of five changing elements. 1. Form, rupa, the physical body, including the brain that processes thoughts. 2. Feeling, vedana, the sensations that arise with each experience, pleasure, pain, neutrality. 3. Perception, sana, the mind's ability to recognize and label things, example, this is a tree, that is an idea. 4. Mental formations, sakra, the habits, reactions, emotions, and patterns that influence our thinking. 5. Consciousness, vaya, the awareness that perceives experience moment by moment. At first glance, it might seem like these five aggregates belong to a central I. But when examined closely, they are all impermanent, conditioned, and constantly changing. Imagine assembling a car from separate parts: wheels, an engine, seats, and so on. If we take the parts apart, where is the car? It only exists as a concept, dependent on the combination of parts. The same applies to what we call self. Stories that reveal the illusion of a fixed self. The Buddha's teachings are not just abstract ideas, they are deeply experiential. Many practitioners, including monks and nuns, have confronted this illusion of self and found liberation through insight. 1. The story of the monk Khimeka, searching for the self. In ancient India, a monk named Khimeka struggled with the idea of non-self. He still felt that there must be some I controlling his thoughts and actions. One day, as he lay sick, fellow monks asked him, "Khimeka, do you believe that your body, feelings, or thoughts are truly you?" He replied, "No, but I still feel a sense of self." The monks encouraged him to investigate further. As Khimeka meditated, he saw that this feeling of I was itself just another mental formation, a habit of mind, not an actual entity. When he realized this deeply, his attachment to self dissolved, and he attained enlightenment. Small blue diamond lesson: like Khimeka, we may feel like we exist as a fixed self, but deep contemplation shows that this feeling itself is an illusion, just another arising thought. 2. The story of Khema, the queen who realized impermanence. Khema was a queen, famous for her beauty and intelligence. She was deeply attached to her appearance, believing it defined her identity. One day, her husband, King Bimbisara, brought her to meet the Buddha. Knowing her attachment to beauty, the Buddha created an illusion, an image of a woman even more beautiful than Khema. As she gazed at this vision, the woman began to age rapidly before her eyes, turning from youth to old age, then into a lifeless corpse. Khema was shocked. She suddenly realized the truth of impermanence, anicca, that beauty, like all things, is fleeting and beyond control. At that moment, she understood Anatta, non-self. If even her body and youth were impermanent, what was there to cling to as a fixed self? She renounced the palace life and became one of the most enlightened nuns in Buddhist history. Small blue diamond lesson: what we cling to as self, our body, identity, status, is all subject to change. Seeing this clearly helps us let go of attachment and find deeper peace. How this applies to our daily lives? Understanding that there is no fixed self controlling our thoughts leads to freedom. How? 1. You stop taking thoughts so personally. Oh, if a negative thought arises, you don't see it as your thought. You simply recognize it as a passing event in the mind. 2. You let go of over-identification with emotions. Oh, instead of saying, I am anxious, you observe, anxiety is arising and will pass. 3. You reduce suffering by loosening attachment. Oh, realizing that all experiences including suffering are temporary, we stop clinging to them as part of a solid identity. This shift in perspective is what allows Buddhist practitioners to face challenges with equanimity and wisdom. Conclusion: beyond the illusion of self. So, what can we take away from this discussion? 1. There is no fixed I behind our thoughts. Oh, thoughts arise and pass away due to conditions, just like clouds in the sky. 2. The sense of self is a habit of the mind, not an actual entity. Oh, just as a car is made up of parts, the self is just a collection of changing processes. 3. Buddhist wisdom helps us break free from unnecessary suffering. Oh, when we stop clinging to a false sense of self, we find greater peace, resilience, and clarity. Final reflection. The Buddha never asked us to believe in non-self blindly. He encouraged deep personal investigation. If we look closely at our experience, we see that thoughts arise and dissolve on their own, emotions shift like the wind, and there is no permanent I to hold onto. This realization doesn't lead to despair, it leads to freedom. When we no longer cling to a rigid self, we become lighter, more present, and more at peace with the natural flow of life. What are your thoughts on this? Have you ever questioned your sense of self? Share in the comments below. 3. The clear awareness behind thoughts, a Buddhist perspective. Beyond the noise of the mind. Have you ever noticed how thoughts continuously arise, seemingly without pause? One moment, you're focused on a task, and the next, your mind is wandering, reliving past mistakes, planning future events, or worrying about things beyond your control. But here's something profound: behind this constant stream of thoughts, there exists a silent awareness, a space of pure observation. Buddhism teaches that this awareness is not just another thought, but a deeper level of consciousness known as Sati, mindfulness. This ability to simply observe our thoughts without judgment, attachment, or resistance is at the heart of Buddhist wisdom. Today, we'll explore 1. The nature of mindfulness and how it helps us detach from the chaos of thoughts. 2. Scientific research that supports the transformative power of mindfulness. 3. Stories from Buddhist tradition that illustrate the power of awareness. 4. Practical techniques for cultivating mindfulness in daily life. Mindfulness, the space between you and your thoughts. Most of us believe that we are our thoughts. If a thought arises, I am not good enough, we accept it as true. If we feel anger, we assume we are angry. But Buddhism teaches us something radically different. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes them. Think of your mind like a vast sky, and your thoughts as passing clouds. Some clouds are dark and stormy, negative thoughts, while others are light and gentle, pleasant thoughts. But no matter what kind of clouds appear, the sky itself remains unchanged, open, and spacious. This is what mindfulness does. It helps us recognize that we don't have to follow every thought or feeling. Instead of being trapped in the storm, we can step back and observe. The science of mindfulness, how it changes the brain. Buddhist monks have practiced mindfulness for over 2,500 years, but only in recent decades has science caught up with what the Buddha taught. Researchers like Jon Kabat-Zinn, the creator of mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, have studied how mindfulness affects the brain. Here are some key findings. 1. Reduces stress and anxiety. fMRI studies show that mindfulness reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center. This helps lower anxiety and emotional reactivity. 2. Improves focus and concentration. Practicing mindfulness increases gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for focus, decision-making, and self-control. 3. Enhances emotional regulation. Mindfulness helps us pause before reacting impulsively. This is why it's widely used in therapy for conditions like depression and PTSD. 4. Increases overall well-being. Mindfulness promotes a sense of inner peace, helping people develop resilience against life's challenges. Buddhist monks and Western neuroscientists may come from different traditions, but they both agree on one thing: training the mind to be mindful changes our experience of life. Stories that illustrate the power of awareness. To truly understand the power of mindfulness, let's explore some stories that illustrate how awareness can transform the way we relate to thoughts and emotions. 1. The story of the two monks and the woman. One day, two Buddhist monks were traveling on a long journey. Along the way, they came to a river where a woman was struggling to cross. The elder monk lifted the woman onto his shoulders, carried her across, and then continued walking. Hours later, the younger monk, who had remained silent, suddenly said, "Brother, why did you carry that woman? We are monks, and we are not supposed to touch women." The elder monk replied calmly, "I put her down at the river bank. Why are you still carrying her?" Lesson: like the younger monk, we tend to carry thoughts long after they have passed. Mindfulness teaches us to let go of unnecessary mental burdens. Thoughts arise and fall away when we don't cling to them, we find freedom. 2. The story of the angry man and the Buddha. A man once approached the Buddha and began insulting him, trying to provoke anger. The Buddha simply sat in silence. After a while, the man asked, "Why do you remain silent? Are you not offended?" The Buddha smiled and replied, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, who does it belong to?" The man answered, "It still belongs to the giver." The Buddha nodded. "Likewise, I do not accept your insults. They remain yours." Lesson: this is mindfulness in action. Instead of reacting automatically to provocation, mindfulness helps us create a pause, a space between stimulus and response. In that space lies the power to choose how we react. How to cultivate mindfulness in daily life. So, how can we apply this wisdom in our own lives? Here are some practical techniques you can use to develop mindfulness. 1. The noting technique, labeling your thoughts. One simple way to create awareness is by labeling thoughts as they arise. Instead of getting lost in them, just note them. Thinking, worrying, remembering, planning. This technique helps us detach from thoughts instead of becoming entangled in them. 2. The one breath pause technique. Before reacting to a stressful situation, take one deep breath and pause. This small gap creates awareness and prevents impulsive reactions. It gives us a chance to respond wisely instead of reacting emotionally. 3. Watching thoughts like clouds. Whenever a thought arises, imagine it as a cloud drifting through the sky. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to fight it. Just watch it come and go. By practicing this, we learn to observe thoughts without attachment or judgment. Conclusion: the freedom of pure awareness. So, what can we take away from all of this? 1. You are not your thoughts. Oh, thoughts appear and disappear on their own. You don't have to identify with them. 2. Mindfulness creates space between you and your reactions. Oh, the ability to observe thoughts without reacting gives you freedom and peace. 3. Science confirms what Buddhism has taught for centuries. Oh, mindfulness physically changes the brain, reducing stress and improving well-being. 4. You don't have to stop thinking, just change your relationship with thoughts. Oh, instead of controlling thoughts, just watch them come and go. Final reflection. The Buddha once said, just as a wise person watches a fire burn and sees the flames rise and fall, so too should one watch the mind, knowing that thoughts arise and pass away. The more we practice mindfulness, the more we realize, we are not the storm, we are the sky. And in that realization, we find the deepest peace. How has mindfulness changed your life? Share your experiences in the comments below. The 4. Applying Buddhist wisdom in daily life, a guide to mindful thinking. Power of thought in our everyday lives. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to become overwhelmed by the constant stream of thoughts, worries, and distractions that flood our minds. We often feel like we're being swept along, helpless to control the mental chaos. But Buddhism offers us a different approach. Through teachings such as Yoniso Mansikara, wise attention, and mindful awareness, we can learn how to work with our thoughts rather than letting them control us. The Buddha's wisdom guides us toward a life of clarity and peace by teaching us how to use our thinking mind consciously, bringing greater awareness to our actions and decisions. By developing mindfulness and practicing wise thinking, we can transform how we approach every aspect of life, from decision-making to relationships to handling stress. In this video, we will explore 1. The concept of Yoniso Mansikara, wise thinking. 2. The story of Angulimala, a notorious criminal who completely changed his life by transforming his way of thinking. 3. Practical steps to apply Buddhist wisdom in solving problems, making decisions, and finding inner peace in daily life. Let's begin by understanding the power of our thoughts. Wise thinking, Yoniso Mansikara, using thoughts consciously. The Buddha emphasized the importance of Yoniso Mansikara, which can be translated as wise attention or thoughtful reflection. In the Buddhist tradition, it refers to using our thinking in a mindful, intentional way, rather than being ruled by unconscious patterns or reactive thinking. Most of us go through life reacting to situations automatically without thinking deeply about how we respond. Our thoughts are often driven by past conditioning, fears, and desires. But wise thinking requires us to step back and ask ourselves, is this thought helpful? Is it leading to peace, clarity, and understanding, or is it causing confusion and suffering? By cultivating Yoniso Mansikara, we can become aware of the thoughts that arise in our minds and choose whether to engage with them or let them pass. For example, if you're feeling angry, instead of immediately acting on that anger, wise thinking invites you to pause, reflect on where the anger is coming from, and ask yourself, is this anger serving me? You give yourself the space to observe the feeling without getting swept away by it. Practical application of Yoniso Mansikara. 1. Pause and reflect. When a thought arises, whether it's about work, relationships, or personal concerns, pause for a moment. Reflect, is this thought helpful or harmful? 2. Reframe negative thoughts. Instead of falling into negative thinking, ask, can I reframe this thought to focus on solutions rather than problems? 3. Choose your response. Wise thinking helps you choose a response that is grounded in awareness rather than automatic reactions. The story of Angulimala, transforming the mind through wise thinking. One of the most powerful examples of the transformative power of wise thinking in the Buddhist tradition comes from the story of Angulimala, a notorious criminal who completely changed his life after encountering the Buddha. Angulimala's name means garland of fingers because he had killed many people and wore their fingers as a necklace. His mind was clouded by hatred, violence, and a deep sense of separation from others. But one day, he encountered the Buddha while on his killing spree. The Buddha, instead of reacting with fear or anger, calmly spoke to Angulimala. The Buddha said, I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped. This statement struck Angulimala deeply. It made him realize that the violence he was committing was not a result of external forces but rather his own unwise thinking. His thoughts had been driving his actions, and those actions had brought him immense suffering not only to others but also to himself. After this realization, Angulimala decided to change his way of thinking. He chose to abandon violence, embraced the Buddha's teachings, and became a monk. He transformed from a murderer into a peaceful, compassionate individual, and in doing so, he found liberation from his past actions. Small Blue Diamond Lesson. Angulimala's story teaches us that no matter how far we've strayed or how ingrained our habits may be, we can always change our thinking. By applying wise attention, we can transform the way we interact with the world and create a life of peace. Practical steps to apply Buddhist wisdom in daily life. Now that we've explored the importance of Yoniso Mansikara and learned from Angulimala's transformation, let's dive into some practical steps you can take to apply these teachings in your own life. 1. Set an intention. Direct your thinking wisely. Before tackling any task or challenge, take a moment to set a clear intention. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of this task? What am I trying to achieve? When you set an intention, you align your thinking with your goal. Whether it's a difficult conversation, a challenging work project, or a personal dilemma, having a clear intention helps you stay grounded and focused on what truly matters. For example, if you're having a difficult conversation with a friend, your intention might be to listen with empathy and speak with kindness. Another example, before starting a project at work, set the intention to approach it with clarity and efficiency rather than anxiety or procrastination. By setting an intention, you ensure that your thoughts are aligned with your values, leading to more positive and effective outcomes. 2. Observe your thoughts. Detach from them. Once you've set an intention, it's time to observe your thoughts. Mindfulness, Sati, is a crucial practice in this process. Instead of being identified with your thoughts, I am stressed, I am anxious, I am angry, you learn to observe them without judgment. When a thought arises, label it, thinking, thinking, thinking. This creates a mental distance between you and the thought, allowing you to recognize that you are not your thoughts. For example, if you're feeling anxious about an upcoming meeting, observe the anxiety without identifying with it. I'm thinking about the meeting. I'm thinking that it will go badly. This allows you to see the anxiety without being controlled by it. 3. Create mental space. Allow thoughts to arise and fade naturally. One of the most powerful techniques in mindfulness is the ability to create mental space. When you allow yourself the time to simply observe your thoughts, you create a gap between the thought arising and your reaction to it. This gap is where true freedom lies. In this space, you can choose your response instead of being driven by automatic reactions. For example, if you're feeling overwhelmed, instead of diving into a thought spiral, take a deep breath and create space between the feeling and your response. This space helps you make decisions with clarity and calmness. 4. Maintain equanimity. Stay balanced in the face of challenges. Life is full of ups and downs. In times of joy, we can become attached to the feeling, and in times of difficulty, we can become overwhelmed. Equanimity, upekkha, is the Buddhist quality of staying balanced no matter the circumstances. For example, if you're facing a personal setback, instead of reacting with frustration or despair, maintain a sense of inner peace by reminding yourself that this is just a temporary situation. Another example, if you receive praise or success, practice not becoming overly attached to it, remembering that all things are impermanent. By cultivating equanimity, you become less reactive and more able to meet life's challenges with wisdom and calm. 5. Embrace intuition. Trust your inner wisdom. Finally, remember to trust your intuition. Often, in the busyness of life, we forget to listen to the quiet wisdom that arises within us. But when we practice mindfulness and wise thinking, we create space for our inner wisdom to emerge. For example, if you're facing a difficult decision, instead of overthinking it, take a moment of quiet reflection. Ask yourself, what does my intuition say? Another example, if you're feeling anxious about an upcoming event, listen to your gut, maybe it's telling you to prepare more or to let go of fear. By trusting your intuition, you allow your inner wisdom to guide you, helping you make better decisions and find greater peace. Conclusion: transforming your life through wise thinking. To summarize, Yoniso Mansikara, wise attention, teaches us how to use our thoughts consciously, with awareness and intention. By practicing mindful observation, creating mental space, and maintaining equanimity, we can transform how we experience the world. Key takeaways. 1. Set an intention before you engage in any task, ensuring your thoughts are aligned with your goals. 2. Observe your thoughts without identifying with them, creating distance and clarity. 3. Create mental space to allow thoughts to rise and fall naturally, giving you the freedom to respond consciously. 4. Cultivate equanimity to remain balanced and peaceful, regardless of external circumstances. 5. Trust your intuition to guide you toward wisdom and insight in decision-making. The story of Angulimala shows us that no matter how lost we may feel in our thoughts, we can always change our way of thinking and transform our lives. By applying these Buddhist principles, we can live with greater peace, wisdom, and joy. What thoughts or practices have helped you create peace in your life? Share in the comments below. Conclusion: freedom through awareness, letting go of the illusion of a fixed self. As we've seen, thoughts arise naturally, and yet, there is no fixed I behind them. Buddhism teaches that the sense of a permanent self, the one who thinks and controls thoughts, is an illusion. Our thoughts are impermanent and interconnected, shaped by countless factors and conditions beyond our control. The Buddhist teaching guides us to recognize that instead of clinging to the idea of a fixed self or thinker, we can observe our thoughts with clarity and mindfulness. By practicing Sati, mindfulness, we can gain the space between thought and reaction, allowing us to live with greater freedom and peace. In the end, the question arises, if there is no permanent thinker, then who is thinking? The answer lies not in philosophical debate but in direct experience. Through mindfulness and awareness of the present moment, we come to understand that the very question dissolves as we see the true nature of thought impermanent, transient, and free from the illusion of self. Recognizing this truth brings us the greatest freedom of all, the freedom to live without being bound by the constant stream of thoughts, to experience life with clear awareness, and to let go of the attachment to an unchanging self. This is the path to liberation, and it begins with the simple yet profound practice of mindful observation. By embracing this understanding, we not only find peace within ourselves but also gain the ability to face life's challenges with a calm, centered mind. This is the true freedom that Buddhism offers, the freedom from the turbulence of thought and the clarity to see things as they truly are. If you found this video helpful, subscribe to Buddhist teachings for more insights on mindfulness, meditation, and the path to enlightenment.